Tonight's talk is about the Wild Orchid Watch project and the development of what we're calling a web app. So Wild Orchid Watch is a national citizen science project that was developed in collaboration with Inspiring Australia, University of Adelaide, the Australian Citizen Science Project Association, TERN, which is Terrestrial Ecosystem Research Network, and NOSSA. So as a project, when we won a grant for this, we were given a brief that we needed to fulfill, and that was that we had some agreed methods. So it's been a team effort over 3 years working with the University of Adelaide, and we had 5 goals. The first was agreed methods. In this, we talked with ecologists to ensure that we collected data that was going to be useful for research scientists and land management, those being our target groups. It was to be a resource as a website, a social media, a platform where orchid enthusiasts can connect with the community and share photos and information, and also assist with identification of orchids. So it was a very broad resource that would help all of us that love the orchids, as well as helping researchers and land managers, etc. So one of our briefs was to develop an app, and we actually developed a web app as opposed to a Play Store app. So this was custom built by the developers at the University of Adelaide, and the information we gathered from that app is fed to a project with iNaturalist Australia, and eventually that ends up in all the various government databases. It was also, so that brings us to the next one, which is the data collection. So we were using photos, locations, and answering questions about the habitat and the environment as part of the information that researchers were requiring. Then, of course, there was the data sharing, and that's, as I said before, is being fed into the various databases that the governments hold. But it's also information that the individual can still see their own information. You get a little bit of a general idea of things, but one of the big things that we made sure is that specific locations are obscured. So any sensitive, if you've accidentally photographed a very sensitive orchid and not known it, that's automatically obscured in the web app, which was a very important thing. So just a bit of background, which most of you will know. There's about 1,700 orchid species in Australia, 27,000 worldwide. Most of them are Australian orchids are endemic. In fact, about 80% of our orchids are only found in Australia, nowhere else in the world. Many of them are threatened. So amongst all the threatened species in the nation, 17% of those nationally threatened species are orchids. Within orchids themselves, about half of the orchids are under some form of threat. So just a bit of background. There's been research being carried on orchids throughout the country with different people, but they rely often on herbarium specimens for gathering their information. They rely on discussions and that with people. But never have they had what the app is developing. So as an example, back in 2010, McGilvray did some research on the effects of climate change and how that was influencing pollination and things. Now I read her paper, and her available source was primarily herbarium specimens, and they tend to be collected opportunistically, not systematically. Using some fancy maths, she was able to work out that there was a difference in flowering time, but she was lacking a lot of information. So for instance, she was doing it on the Diurus orientis, I went back over all the NOSSA journals for the 40 years work that we had. Well, it wasn't 40 years back in 2010, but I went back over all the journals and got out all that data. And I thought she didn't have any of that available to use. So that's where researchers have been in that area of data collection. So the question was how to capture and improve the monitoring of orchids. And there are lots of individuals out there doing it, but Australia's a big country. There's a lot of space and there's a lot of places we don't get to systematically, but a lot of us do get to lots of different places individually. So the question became, was there a role for citizen science to fill that collection of data gathering? And that's really the concept where Wild Orchid Watch came from. Now, this was a name that Robert came up with, Wild Orchid Watch. We were messing around one day with all sorts of different words and we thought, wow, that sounded like it would really work. And this was back in 2011, after the production of the book and the DVD that NOSSA has done, and Robert's written the book. And we started looking into various things, and in 2014, we had a group of people that are interested in trying to improve how we collect orchid information and help people with identification. That was a very important part. And Robert applied, we found some really good stuff in America. So we applied to the Australian Orchid Foundation to transfer this software from America to Australia. It failed, but it actually helped us to understand and learn a lot more. We had a software engineer, he spent 2 years working on it, and then that was Robin Goodfellow, and he eventually said, look, let's start again. So we start with scratch. What was our wish list? And we went from there. And with our wish list, we actually applied to the Australian Government Inspiring Australia grant for almost $500,000. And this was to do with an app development and a communication. Now you'd think $500,000's enough, but oops, just missed one. Sorry. But we have also applied to the Australian Orchid Foundation for a bit extra because part of the grant did require research happening. And I'll get to that a bit later on. So this was a small idea that has just grown over the years, and it's really good now. We've got there. So just a little bit on the team. Obviously, there's Robert and myself. Then we've got the university people. So Ben Sparrow heads it up. Sally, what was Sally's role? In the admin. It did need a lot of admin, that's right. Andrew Tokov led the tech team. Greg Gurin is our ecologist, botanist. Katie Irvine, who was meant to speak tonight, was the communications officer, and she's very much involved in citizen science promotion. And Tom was also another of our tech people. And actually, we're very fortunate he has been able to stay for the whole of the thing because he was actually heading off to Canada to a new job when COVID locked everything down. He got as far as, I think, he didn't get very far. He didn't get out of the country. So he's been really very good on working on things. And the tech team, we really needed their help. It was fantastic. So just to some timelines. So in 2018, we had to develop methods. 2019 was the technology development. And interestingly, we started with one concept, but as time went on, new things were being developed. So we were able to hit the right time with some of the new development that's going around. Then 2019 in the spring, we had a release of the beta testing of the app, and we had various people that came along to some field trips and tried out the app, and we found all the errors and did everything we could to make it break, and having children come along and do some of that is great fun. It was a wide range of people, and that was really, really great. Then in winter, we had a soft launch, which was the full development of the app. We're now in the point where fine-tuning things, but basically the app is now can be used. And the ongoing is that's when researchers, etc., will be able to make use of the data as we populate it. So a little bit of, I referred earlier on to iNaturalist, so probably just need to explain about this. So one of the things that came into play that wasn't around when we first developed was iNaturalist was around, but it hadn't developed as far as it had. Now, that was started in America, a few $1 million with the Smithsonian, and so they've got a lot of behind them, and they've now got also quite a few years of experience. So rather than reinventing the wheel, we worked with them and developed a lot of things that they hadn't yet developed. So it's an online community. And as I mentioned, iNaturalist Australia, now that used to be the Atlas of Living Australia. And it's a place where you can, not only the orchids, but other things, you can share observations. So currently, there are over 3 million people signed up to iNaturalist. So and they all help each other with identifying things. So it's a very good, stable. One of the things that we needed with developing Wild Orchid Watch was to have a stable platform. And this has given us that, which was something we didn't see at the start. So just specifically looking at Wild Orchid Watch and how that sits in it. So it is an Australian, an iNaturalist project. It's, in a sense, stands alone. It's, through it you collect data, which I've already said actually, sorry. But it's data that's specific to WOW, the things that the scientists and researchers have sort of said they would like to have. Let's just move on. So basically this is a web app. Now, just an explanation, web app means you don't have to go to the Play Store to download it. It's one of the things that has come in recent days, and some of the big boys like Twitter now use what they call a progressive web app. So it's a much simpler, a harder to break app. It's using your phone, taking pictures, and filling in the questions that are asked. So they're actually, without going into a lot of detail, there is a video on the website that will give instructions on how to install the app and how to use it. So probably the simplest thing for this talk is to just say, go to the wildorchidwatch.org website, and it's all their questions and everything else. So just a few little things on observations. One of the things we developed very early in the piece was a business card, which is scaled so that people can have an idea of what size of the plant you're looking at, because as you know, like with comparing, say, Thelomitra pauciflora is very tiny, but Thelomitra nuda is quite big, but put the two together in a photograph, you might not always realise the size difference. It's also got the colour on here so that if for any reason your picture is affected, like, you know, you get washed out photos, etc., you can actually calibrate back to what the colour should be, because they're a definite colour code. So that was one of the things we did very early in the piece, and that's been very popular, and I do have them here if anyone wants them, and they're now plastic coated so that they'll last a bit better. So yeah, they're available. So just this slide is just to give you a bit of an idea on what it would look like on your screen. So you sign into the app. So looking at the left-hand side there, that's what your home screen looks like. You then click on for your observations. One of the advantages is that this can work offline. You don't have to be online. What will happen is once you come back in online, it will automatically sync. So that's a great advantage. That was one of the things that we really wanted to be in there. You can also use your normal cameras, and you can go to the website and enter it all in through the website as well. So you've really got two methods of entry. Obviously, it was designed for phones, as making it that's generally what you've got in your pockets, and it's quick and easy to do. Now, one of the things with this app was to have, we've got two modes that we call, the first one is a basic mode, and the concept behind that is to have something that is really quick and still get useful information. So if you're short on time, you don't have to go through the whole thing. So that requires a minimum of 3 photographs, the habitat, microhabitat, and the whole orchid photo. You can put in more pictures than what is actually requested, and that's always a good idea, particularly as with some species, it might be the back of the sepal that you need to look at, or it might be the leaf or whatever. So different angles, the column, for instance. Automatically, because it's on your phone, if you've turned your GPS off, it'll request to turn it back on again, because it collects the data, the date and time and location. You don't have to think about that. There is a map you can look at to see whether you are in the right place. And there's only a few questions, so it is rather brief for that matter. But more importantly is the detailed mode. Now, this one, we really would love to see people using it more so than the other mode. It does take a little bit of time getting used to it. There's a lot more questions that are asked, but these are the questions that become important when researchers are gathering the data. So you get things like, you'll be asked about the population records, so just do a rough count, see in your mind a particular space and say, well, I see 20 orchids in this spot or whatever. And it will, you can select the size area you're looking at. As you use the app, and this is what I'm finding, you'll actually find ways of getting smarter with how to use it. But it is primarily, we've tried to make it intuitive. And I've tried to break it as much as possible. So we've really pushed them on that one. Observations. Now, because there is a map, the data is collected and stored. But one of the biggest questions the whole way we've been in all our discussions with anybody, even before we started the work on the app, was security and location of sensitive data. I think we would spend half an hour just discussing with someone that we're first introducing the concept of the app to. That's been happening for years in all of our conversations. And so we've been very, very much aware of it. And the app will let you see your data where you took it, but it will obscure it, so only those that are authorised to have access would know where it is. And that's been, like I said, that has been the major thing. Now, a word on that is that if you use, so we'll get these summaries and that. So it's what we call the geo-privacy. If you use iNaturalist, they do not obscure the data, which is why it's very important that you go through the Wild Orchid Watch app to enter your orchid data. With iNaturalist, you actually have to go in yourself and obscure it, and sometimes you forget. So that's was like I said, a very important thing, and we got that from a lot of researchers. Their concern was with that. And the other, of course, why we say don't go through iNats is all those extra questions that become important. So we did have a lot of questions, and as a result, you'll find all of that is on the website under frequently asked questions. And anytime anyone's got any questions, you can always email to the website and we will look at that. I'm sure we've forgotten something. So as far as the data goes, it's based around the concept of using machine learning. And that's a whole fascinating area when you can see what machines can do. So what will happen is you'll take a picture and it will start to suggest a possible identification just from picture recognition. The more data that goes in, the more efficient the machines get at recognizing. Now, this will have the advantage that if people are misidentifying, it can help to correct some of that. And I think ultimately it will also have the advantage that we'll start to see whether we are looking at something that's different from other things. It does require a lot of pictures for that to work, and that's why photographs are very important. The other is with getting identification, you actually don't need to know the identification of what you photographed. You can even put in a name. You can make up a name if you're not sure what it is. You say, well, this is a yellow orchid. And that will be accepted, because then what will happen, once it goes into the project, others will look at it and they will, there'll be a conversation to determine. So no one person does a full identification. It requires a minimum of 2. And if someone comes along and disagrees with it, then the whole thing's got to be looked into. So it tightens up that whole identification area. We use the names that out of Kew Gardens called Plants of the World Online. It's a list that when a species has been formally identified through due process, it goes onto that list, and we use that as our resource. And as I keep saying, researchers, land managers are able to use that data further down the track. Now, the sensitivity, we keep coming back to that because everyone keeps coming up. So in working out how we were going to deal with sensitivity, the Australian government has a sensitivity data policy, which is what we've had. So as I've said, records obscured and there's privacy. So research. Part of our grant was that we had to have some research coming out of this. And so welcome to Sam Bywaters, who is a student, PhD student, and she is our first person to use the data from the WOW app, and she's doing her topic is conserving orchids in a changing climate. So I'll be going out with her this month a couple of times. I'll see how she's been going with it. So, but she's very enthusiastic about it, so it's really, really great. We actually have another PhD student doing some work which the app wouldn't have been suitable for what she's doing now, but if we'd had a lot of that information beforehand, would have saved us a lot of hours. That's where the app would really come in handy, Leo. All those hours we spend out in the field trying to see where things were, we would actually have an idea before we got out there. And one of the things is that Katie did say to me, she's had a lot of interest from people that work in the field in areas that we normally would not, the public would normally not be able to get to, and they're wanting to use the app out there. So that's really, really good. So engagement. Sophie Thompson very kindly agreed to be the commentator for our video that we produced in 2019. So it's Sophie Thompson and Professor Michelle Waycock from the Herbarium. And Michelle she's been someone that has been supporting us right back since we first started talking about it. They've been very keen for something like this to develop. So that video is on YouTube, and it's on the website or on our Facebook group, so you can watch that. And coming up in November, Gardening Australia has also done a episode for WOW, and that will be filmed sometime early November. I think they did Dan DeVout. No, wait on. They did an orchid one the other week, didn't they? Yeah. So keep watching. So getting involved. There's the wildorchidwatch.org website. There is Instagram, there's Facebook. And of course, if you go through iNaturalist, you'll be able to find us in any one of those areas. I think the whole WOW team would like to thank the orchid enthusiast community. That, you know, there's been so much support and feedback that the team has received on the web app, and they've been very free in sharing their photos on Instagram and things. And the enthusiasm, has been quite a lot going out there. Then, of course, there were those that helped us with the funding. So the Australian Inspiring Australian Science Engagement Program, the Australian Orchid Foundation, and then, of course, the collaboration that we had with TURN and NOSSA, the University of Adelaide, and the Australian Citizen Science. We've had all of those there as well. And I think that was it.